There's two things I'm going to ask you to do. First, I'm going to invite you. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to feel what it was like to be in our place. My place is a little 6-foot square concrete cell in the outskirts of Hanoi at a camp we called the Zoo. I had been in prison for 5 months, and I'd been in solitary confinement for 28 days. I couldn't see anything those days, partly because I didn't have a window, but more importantly because both my eyes were swollen shut from being beaten in the face every day for 28 straight days. Less than 5 feet from where I spent my entire life in those days, it was a little rusty bucket. It had a horrible smell, but it wasn't critical. What was critical was the bucket only had a 1-day capacity. Because I was in a great deal of trouble, I hadn't been allowed to go empty the bucket for 10 days. The only single option I had to dip the contents of that bucket, and I had to pour it through a little hole in the back wall of my cell, and I had to do that with my soup bowl that I ate from that nobody even bothered to wash. I laid on the concrete floor. Temperature in concrete at that time was about 20 degrees. That was the lowest point in my entire life.
50 years ago today, our war officially ended. Somewhere between 40 to 60% of us actually saw combat. And for Army or Marine infantry, the action was comparatively unrelenting. Here's an example. Infantrymen in the Pacific during World War II generally experienced about 40 days of actual combat in the 4 years of that war. In contrast, grunts in Vietnam experienced 240 days of combat in a 1-year tour.
I was sitting in front of my locker at Old Pitt Stadium. All of a sudden, one of our equipment men hollered, "Hey, Blair, there's a letter over here for you." So I got over to the table, perused through the mail, and my God, there it was. My first piece of fan mail. And I picked it up very tenderly, opened it up, slipped out the paper inside, unfolded it. It was from my uncle. My Uncle Sam. Now that was the worst fan letter I've ever received in my life. So when the bullet entered my thigh, and I was laying on the ground, when all of a sudden out of the corner of my eye, I saw a grenade come flying through the air. And it hit my commanding officer right in the middle of the back, bounced off, rolled between my feet, and before I could jump out of the way, it blew up. And blew up through my lower feet and my legs. And again, we were in another firefight. Until a sister platoon fought its way down, and they started dragging us out of there. And it dragged me through the night until they got to a point where they just couldn't drag me any further. They'd been in battle all day as well. They said, "Don't worry, we'll send a stretcher back for you." When all of a sudden, I see these two black hands reach down, scoop me up, throws me over his shoulder, and he starts carrying me to the helicopter. Now, the helicopter's a long ways away, and this black man will put me down. My blood all over him. He'd catch his breath, pick me up again, and continue on until he got me onto that chopper. I never saw him again. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his name. I didn't know where he came from. I didn't know where he lived. But I'll tell you this, I'm here today because of a colorblind soldier back in 1969 who saw not that he was black and I was white, but that blood was blood was blood.
Well, the Battle of Way City was pretty ugly, and we got to the last 2 or 3 blocks and we cleared them, and by that time we were animals. And we got to the very last block and we blew this house all apart and fragged it. And then we were there for about 2 days letting the families come back in. We let this family come through, and there was a papa son and a mama son and a daughter and then 2 little boys. And they came to that house we had destroyed. Man, it was one of the few times in Vietnam after a firefight or 2 that I was a human. And I felt terrible. And then we saw the daughter down the street, and she was picking up rice. It wasn't even a handful of rice. They hadn't ate for days or weeks or months. And my buddy had remembered that a few blocks back, we had used a rice bag up on a windowsill for like a sandbag. And we went and got that and brought it back to this family. And they went in the house. They came out about 20 minutes later. And they fed us first. I came away from Vietnam loving the Vietnamese people, respected them, and I do more now.
I fled Vietnam when I was only 2 years old with my 10-year-old brother and 3 teenage cousins. We fled Saigon, made it to the Philippines, and then Guam, and then Eglin Air Force Base. And so I grew up in Pensacola, Florida. And in 1994, after I graduated from college, I ended up finding my Vietnamese family after 20 years living at the same address. So after finding my Vietnamese family, I slowly began the process of healing and learning more about how I got here, about what happened to my Vietnamese mother, who I never saw again. It's been a long identity journey, but I am so proud to be Vietnamese American. And if it weren't for you all here in this room today, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
So I got to an aid station where I got patched up and then flew to Da Nang before I went to Tokyo, where I spent 3 weeks in the hospital before I came back to the States. And after a couple of weeks that I was in that ward, I finally got enough courage to ask my physician about my situation and whether or not I could ever get back and play this silly game of football again. His response to that question was something like this. He said, "Don't worry about it. You're going to have a normal life. You're going to be able to do the things that normal people just don't expect to get back in their gridiron." He said, "Because of the fact you just won't have the strength nor the flexibility to do the things that are necessary to be a running back in the NFL." For you see, what he had formulated from his point of view, from his stream of information, correct or not, in his diagnosis was a perception about my ability. But as my authority figure, he what? He just sucked that hope right out. 2 days later, I get a postcard to mail, a simple postcard. It's got 2 lines on it. It says this: "Rock, team is not doing well. We need you. Art Rooney, owner of the team."
We often found ourselves wondering if all the pain and suffering were really worth it. No clear-cut winners, no victory parades when our war ended and we came home. You know, it seemed like half the nation turned away from us, angry and upset, disillusioned. The other half didn't know what the hell to say, and so they said nothing. And for us, that silence was deafening. We eventually understood that much of our nation had simply confused the war with the selfless warriors who fought it. But we forgave them somewhere along our journey. We knew the truth, and in some ways, it set us free. We vowed that no American veteran of later wars would ever face the ignorance and the disparagement that we did after Vietnam.
It's going to be a really, really sad day when the only expert in history are the historians. Please look at a Vietnam veteran, get to know them, talk to them, ask their stories, ask them the question, what do you think? Are you proud to be an American?
You may ask yourself, was it worth it? Should the U.S. have entered this decade-long battle for such an ending? My parents and most of you out there might pose the question this way: are the God-given ideals and freedoms espoused in the Declaration of Independence and supported in the Constitution worthy of the fight? I believe that this community knows the answer.
Thank you feels very empty to me. It's the most I can say and the most I can do, but I will just say, for all the Vietnam veterans and Southeast Asia veterans, thank you not only for being here tonight, thank you for serving with honor and character and integrity. And we are grateful for you planting the seeds of inspiration for my generation. And now we will pay it forward for the next generation. Thankful to you.
Most people haven't seen a Purple Heart, and I carry this around. But I also carry this piece of candy right here. I came home from Vietnam in March of 1969. In 1991, my wife was at a Vietnamese nail salon getting her nails done. And she said, my husband was in Vietnam. And she said, where? And my husband, she could only remember Way City. And he said, everybody here's from Way City, the whole family. We have 5 families that live here. All the firstborn are going to college, right? Give this to your husband. And tell him thank you. We love your freedom. And we love your democracy. 23 years before one person said thank you.
I was living in solitary confinement. Things weren't looking too good. And I honestly wasn't convinced that I was going to survive that ordeal. And so in that dismal area, I started focusing on why am I here? And what am I going to do while I'm here to make this come out right? And I made a conscious decision that day that no matter what happened in prison, no matter how long I was there, no matter what happened when I came home, I would never allow myself to have another bad day as long as I lived. Suddenly I heard it was our signal for church call on Sunday. And even though I'd been separated from everybody, I never lost sight of the value and the importance of going to church call with everyone. Our church call always started, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Something we did with greater sincerity anything we'd ever done in our lives. Normally followed by the 23rd Psalm, looked like it had been written for us. One line says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The other line says, thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. My cup runneth over. Probably the most ironic situation I'm ever going to be in my life, locked up 10,000 miles from home in a crummy communist prison, all by myself, giving thanks for my good fortune. Because you see, those of us in the prison behind the bars, we were the free people in the prison. The guys on the outside had the guns and the keys, but those people are in prison for lives because their minds are captured. We always ended our church service in prison by singing God Bless America. And we sang it very quietly in those days. Obviously, we did not need to get any more trouble. Tonight, I want to end your little tour in solitary confinement by inviting you to join me singing God Bless America. And as we sing, you may feel a little lump in your throat. Maybe you'll feel a little chill up your spine. That, ladies and gentlemen, is pride in being an American. And that's pride in doing the very best at everything you do every day of your life, getting up tomorrow prepared to do it better. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we felt every minute of every hour of every day for 6, 7, 8, in one man's case, 9 years. And that's what we reached out, and that's what we grabbed onto and held on to. Please join me singing God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above.